Hello and welcome to Your United Way. Our show is really all about connecting you with your community. I'm your host for today's show, Ashley Wright, and I'm also the Executive Director for the United Way here in Paducah and McCracken County. United Way has always been committed to meeting the growing and changing needs in our community, and so we're really excited today to spend an entire episode talking about some of the changes and the new processes that the United Way is going to be implementing in the hopes of better meeting the needs in our community today. And so welcome. Monique Zuber is our first guest, and Monique, you are a veteran of Your United Way. But why don't you tell our viewers that may not know you a little bit about yourself and what you do at the United Way?
Well, like you said, my name is Monique Zuber, and I work for the United Way. I am the Community Impact Director, which involves a variety of things, including volunteer recruitment and coordination of some of our grants processing.
You've also been really intricately involved in the work that we have been doing over really close to the last year at the United Way. Why don't you talk a little bit about the transition that the United Way has gone through this past year?
Well, as some of you may know, we had 3 focus areas that have been established for a few years at the United Way, and were very appropriate for our community at the time. But we have decided to realign our focus areas with the United Way Worldwide's focus areas, which are education, income, and health. And we're very excited about those things, about that process of change. We think it's timely for our community.
And was the shift not only to align with United Way Worldwide goals, but are they providing more structure for what we want to measure in the community?
I think we'll really see that. Before we had our previous 3 focus areas, and we had our programs that applied for funding tell us what they wanted to measure surrounding those 3 focus areas. And moving to what we know as the community impact model, which we'll talk about a little bit more, we have set the outcomes for our agencies. We have said, this is what we want to see our dollars do. How can you do that? So we'll have those community-wide measurable goals.
So talk a little bit about this process. So I know that the United Way has shifted to these 3 focus areas, but what does that actually mean?
Well, it has been quite a process. We've had 3 focus area panels, one around education, one around income, and one around health, and about 15 volunteers was set on those panels. And we didn't just have anybody come and participate in those things. We had content experts, United Way donors, and some of our partner agencies, those agencies that provide services surrounding education, income, and health. And the reason we did that is we wanted their opinion. We wanted the expertise, because we can ask the general public or me, but we see things through a certain lens, and they see the bigger picture a lot of times. So we wanted their input for all of our outcomes through the process.
So these 3 focus area groups really set the community-wide goals.
Absolutely.
And talk a little bit about what you mean when you say content expert. So who is that, and why is that different?
Well, for example, for education focus area, we invited educators from preschool all the way through here at WKCTC. We had people from the board offices, so administrative staff, as well as people who do one-on-one work with students. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were getting knowledgeable folks around each focus area.
And is that something that we've done in the past, or how does that look different than?
We haven't done that in the past as much. Sometimes when we have donors who are going to sit on our community investment panels that help decide where our funding is allocated to, we've kind of had that a little bit, but it hasn't been as structured. That's something we really want to do going forth, is when we're having our grants processing, our funds allocation, we want to make sure it's people who are knowledgeable in those areas to make sure that we're making our dollars stretch as far as we can.
So you have these 3 focus areas. It sounds like you've got a really diverse group of people sitting on these panels, helping to kind of outline the community goals. Can you walk through that process a little bit with us?
Sure. I believe we have our logic triangle, which will allow you all to view, and it kind of outlines what each meeting was for the focus area panels. And we started at the top of our triangle. We have our focus area. And then we have our vision, and that's where we started. We came together at our first meeting and really wanted to set of what we wanted the vision to be for that focus area in our community. The next meeting was on barriers. What is standing in the way of us achieving that vision for each focus area? The next meeting we had set those community level outcomes, so those measurements that we want to see, those changes we want to see in our community that will help us overcome the barriers and reach that vision. And the last part that you'll see on the logic triangle is the strategies, and those are those specific programs that will apply for funding to kind of move up this triangle for us. And that's something that's a bit of a switch for us too. Years ago, United Way would give funding just to agencies. Then it was narrowed down to specific programming, and now we're really going to be looking at giving funding to change these focus areas to reach these community level outcomes. So we're not looking at just saying here programs, decide what you're going to measure. What we're saying is here, let's change this our community in these focus areas.
So what are some examples, you talked about education, but what were some examples of what they focused on?
They really focused on a holistic approach to education, so not necessarily just the scholastic portion. We always want to focus on supporting our teachers and our schools and our educators, but we also looked at the whole picture of a student. So maybe those mentoring programs or those programs that help kids get ready for kindergarten before they even start that education process. So I was pleased to see and kind of surprised to see that educators went that direction, but that's really what they thought our community needed the biggest support on, and looking at family support. Because it's not just what the student does at school, it's also what they're going home to. Does the family know how to help them with their homework? Do they know how to make everyday opportunities into a learning experience? And so looking at changing those types of things.
And did we model this off of anything, or did we kind of develop this on our own?
Kind of a little bit of both. We looked at a variety of United Ways across the country that have gone through this process before us, kind of saw what worked and what didn't work well. One United Way we really looked at was United Way of Asheville, and that they were very helpful to us to give us a lot of materials and what worked and what didn't work, so they were an intricate part of this for us as well.
And then what kind of things did our community add that maybe we weren't doing in other parts of the country?
Well, one thing that we really looked at was adding those experts and our partner agencies, and really including those two pieces, which is something that they suggested we do that they didn't do. So I thought that was an important piece, was to make sure that we did that, and to communicate as much as we can, which I think that we've done a good job with our partner agencies and the community, just keeping everyone involved in our changes.
And why do you think that this shift from the three focus areas that were a little bit more ambiguous before to these three focus areas of education, income, and health with specific community goals, why is that important to a donor?
For me, it's exciting, and it's, as a United Way donor as well as a United Way staff person, it's exciting to be able to see what our dollars are doing through the community. I like to see what those individual programs are doing, but this way we'll be able to measure how we're making a change throughout the community on specific outcomes. So it's also exciting to see, if one year something's not working, we can change that. And that's a piece that I think we've missed in the past, because we didn't know collectively what our dollars were doing throughout the community. We just knew about these specific programs and what they were doing. So that's why I think it's important to a donor, is that we can see how you are changing our community through your donation.
It's really exciting.
It is exciting.
And hopefully beginning to see some collaboration between these organizations as there's a common goal or thread between
Absolutely.
them. So, you talked briefly about how the education focus area group, you were surprised, but in general, was there anything else that kind of stands out or was surprising to you in this process that in the beginning you had no idea how it was going to look?
I would think one thing in the income focus area that I was pleasantly surprised with was what people really wanted to help bridge that gap between someone being on public assistance to being off of public assistance. They want to assist those people in that gap, and that's something that I think we've really been missing throughout the country and in our state, is helping people during that gap period and not just immediately cutting off services. And so that was an exciting possibility for me to see.
You hear a lot about that. You hear a lot about how people are right on the threshold of moving off of public assistance or public aid, but the gap between what they can make at a job and what the assistance just doesn't make sense. So it is exciting, and I think probably not something that certainly that we focused on at the United Way before.
Sure.
So, was there anything in this process that you found to be more challenging than you had originally thought?
We were blessed to be able to have volunteer facilitators for eeach focus area, so that I, as a United Way staff person, could kind of step out of that role and really let the community drive the direction that we wanted to go. So I didn't have a whole lot of expectations. I was very pleased with all of our facilitators. I do have to say that wasn't a surprise, but they really took the lead on that and were able to have an unbiased opinion on things, and so that was a good thing for our process.
Well, you mentioned the process, but what was the time frame for this?
Sure. We started meeting, we had a training for everyone who would be on a focus area panel in January, and we had a monthly meeting from February until May. So these people kind of got to know each other, and that was kind of fun to watch and see some connections that were made as well through our community, which I think will be a benefit too.
And then who can apply for this?
Our new community investment funding model will go into effect this fall, and in October on our website will be a pre-application. And any nonprofit agency in our community can get on our website come October and go through the pre-application. It'll probably be a list of about 15 questions, things like, do you have a yearly audit, are you a 501c3 agency, and specific things like that. After you apply for that, if you're approved after that pre-application, you'll be able to apply in November. We will have the full community investment application available in November.
And who will serve on, in the past, you know, community members served on the funding committees that made those decisions. What will look different this year, if anything?
One big key thing, as we've talked about, is that there will be content experts on those panels. We won't just say, okay, United Way donors come and serve. We still want that donor voice, but what we're going to look for in our donors is, are they an expert in income? Are they an expert in health or education? And strategically place them so they can make more educated decisions on how our funding dollars are spent.
So it will be more of a mix of content experts and just general donors to the process. And if people are interested in learning more about the overall process or how to apply, what do they need to do?
They need to go up to our new website. We do have a new website that's new and improved, and they can go to our website, which is unitedwaypaducah.org, or they can call me at the United Way at 442-1691, or email me at monique@unitedwaypaducah.org.
And we've talked a lot about the community goals, but are the community goals up on the website where people can see those and really look through in detail what these committees came up with?
They are, and on our website there's a tab for our work, and it has an education and income and a health tab, so you'll be able to see the finalized version that our community investment panels were able to put on there.
And those are the areas that we're going to drive funding towards over the next several years and hope to really move the needle.
Correct.
Well, I appreciate, Monique, so much you being here, and of course the opportunity to get to work with you and what you're doing in the community every day, and look forward to having you back next year to kind of report on the progress that has been made. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will be back with our next guest as we look further into this year's United Way transition.
Take my hand and start a brand new day, and together as one we'll start to see some change.
Underneath everything we are, underneath everything we do, we are all people, connected, interdependent, united. And when we reach out a hand to one, we can influence the condition of all. That's what it means to live united.
Hello and welcome back to Your United Way. I'm really excited to have our next guests because they were intricately involved in this transition process that the United Way has been going through this past year. And so I want to I'll allow our guests to introduce themselves so I don't misspeak any of your names. So go ahead.
My name is LaDonna Butler. I work with the University of Kentucky in the early childhood field.
My name is Stephanie Suazo, and I work with Henry A. Petter Supply Company as their HR manager.
So both of you all ended up facilitating one or two of the three groups, the education, income, or health groups for the United Way. Can you talk a little bit about how you all ended up being involved as the facilitators?
Well, basically, I came and talked to you about my interest in education about a year ago and talked to you about some things that I was working on, some things going on in the community. And then when Monique called me and contacted me about leading the education part, I was really excited about it, looking forward to it.
I initially was going to volunteer for the mentor program for your recent graduates of the Impact Poverty program, and that never worked out. And then Monique contacted me about helping out with this initiative, and it, like LaDonna said, I was very excited to be able to help facilitate the process.
Well, you all, I think, had one of the most important roles in this process. helping to guide a group of close to 15 people, and as we've discussed, some of them having stronger personalities than others. But can you talk a little bit about the actual process that you used to kind of help you as you went through these several weeks?
We had a guide. Monique had given us a facilitator's guide, and basically the first thing that we had to do was kind of help them to cast a vision. And we were merely the recorders and the facilitators. We weren't trying to lead them in one way or the other. But when you first get started on casting a vision, they wanted to go ahead and move all the way through the whole logic model at first and say, well, how will this vision play out? And so just getting them focused on, this is the vision, what do you want to see happening, and kind of leading them from there.
And what about, talk about the time frame, Stephanie, will you, that this all played out in?
What worked out great was the facilitators meeting initially to get to learn the process that we would go through. Then from there was having each meeting organized. The materials that the United Way provided were excellent for the facilitator to organize what would happen each meeting. From that process, the time frame we just played out following the logic triangle, the vision, the barriers, the outcomes.
It may be different for both of your groups, but LaDonna, you help facilitate the education portion, obviously, because of your education background. And Stephanie, you focused on the income. And then Deborah Jolly, who's not able to be here with us today, facilitated the health focus group. So can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned the struggle in the beginning because everybody wanted to jump to the end, but what did you all find setting the vision or the barriers or the outcomes? Which was the most difficult for your groups?
What do you think was most difficult for you?
I think the outcomes, really narrowing in on a specific measurable goal for the program to achieve.
And for my group, I would say it was definitely the vision at first. They seemed to kind of get in the groove after a while, but the vision just kind of rounding them up and saying, are you sure this is what you want? Because there were a few surprises about where they initially wanted to focus on and some of the things that they saw happening towards the end. It's like we're only casting the vision. So that was the biggest struggle, I think, that we had.
And you said surprises, so talk a little bit, what surprises did you all encounter when you first, just through this process?
Well, I think the surprise for me was there were some things that I, of course, was bringing to the table. Now, only if they asked questions of a content expert were we sharing. But I think that a family is a child's first teacher, and that's really important to me. And I was really surprised that they went straight there, talking about the importance of family engagement and school readiness, and the things that impact the children as they're first entering school or even being born. They were really concentrated on birth to 5, but of course that expanded, as we cast the vision for our whole community.
And we were talking before the show that family engagement is really a focus and in some ways really a trend right now in the education department, I guess, isn't it? So we kind of lined up with that.
Yes, we did, and even I had of course had some experience with family engagement because I work in the early childhood field and doing family involvement activities and things like that. But I recently even attended a webinar last week about it, and it seems like there's a lot of research and things being done about the importance of family engagement and how to engage families.
Well, I think that's exciting and really speaks to the success of this process, because you've got that kind of research being brought into these community focus groups as well, and so that allows us to use that kind of information and what the newest research that we have about issues like education as we craft our community goals. So.
Yes, and hopefully there'll be some new tools available from this research that maybe some of the agencies might use to help them.
Absolutely. And what about for you, Stephanie? I know working in HR, you're dealing with jobs and what a big issue that is for people coming out of poverty. So what did you professionally think going in was going to be some of the outcomes that were not?
I would have to say nothing really surprised me because I tried not to have any preconceived notions entering into the process. One thing that was a surprise was how easy it was to get focused on certain aspects and then trying to draw back out to that bigger picture, which kind of relates back to the vision, the issues you had with the vision statement. But overall, I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better group of professionals working together to work through the process to get these outcomes.
Did you feel like it was a diverse group, that you had folks that were both kind of in the trenches as well as people that maybe had no prior knowledge to the issue, and was that helpful?
I think it was really helpful.
Absolutely. And what was even more beneficial was they were not afraid to speak up when it came to their ideas on the income process that we went through.
And did you feel like, as two individuals that professionally are working in those fields, that it was difficult not to keep, not to keep quiet? I would imagine it was a struggle to.
It was a little difficult because I wanted to just cheer a few times when they said things. I was like, yes, that's really right on. But, sometimes I would echo what they were saying with maybe some research that I knew, but I tried very hard not to be engaged in actually the outcome of what we were doing.
What about for you, Stephanie?
For me, it was more of a process. I'm fairly new to the Paducah McCracken County community. So for me, it was asking them a lot of questions. And oftentimes they would look at me kind of like, well, it's this way or it's that way, or do you want us to, I think they thought I was trying to lead them.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter was, I was just looking for clarity on the situations that they were talking about, whether it was cost of employment was a huge issue that we spent a lot of time on, transportation, daycare, what it takes to get to work. So it was, definitely an interesting process.
One of the things that I thought was interesting, that there was a common thread that transportation was an issue that we saw across all of the focus areas, some more than others, but that it was a real issue for people specifically in the jobs group.
Absolutely. It was something that was brought up frequently, but at the same time, they were wise enough to know that they couldn't themselves solve the issues related to transportation. It was, how do we look at the issues that surround transportation?
And I think that that's one of the most challenging things, is to recognize that no one organization, the United Way or any other organization, is going to solve all of the community problems. So how do we focus in on what can be solved, and how do we bring together partners from around the community to help us really grow those solutions, I think. What do you think, for this community, what do you think is so important for them to know about why the way that we did this, why this process was so important?
Well, I think just all the different players that we had at the table, that we had content, people who were experts in those fields that could share information, members of the community, then the agencies as well. It was sort of like gathering everyone's different personal and also work experience at a table and bringing those together, and then really hashing out, what are the needs, what do you know about in the community, what do you see are the issues, and really just bringing those ideas together just based on their own experiences.
What about for you, Stephanie?
Again, it goes back to, what was the question?
About why this process was so different, maybe, than what other organizations might use to set that strategic goal. Like, why the process was so important.
Well, I think it was absolutely important because it was strategically set up to focus on each of the vision, the barriers, the outcomes, because it really led to ultimately where the community will head in the future. It's important, you have to stay focused on what your goals are in order to be successful. And from the sounds of it, United Way had come to that point where they needed to refocus what their goals are going to be.
Absolutely.
And using that tool as a logic triangle was very helpful too. You know, first just casting the vision, and then how are we going to get there? And just that process of moving through, okay, what are the barriers? And not looking just at the solutions, just identifying what are those barriers, and then what community level outcomes do we want to have. And I'm really anxious to see what people are going to set forth for the strategies for us to reach that vision as a community as a whole.
I am too. I mean, I'm hoping that it will really generate some creative thinking, some outside of the box thinking, that people will come to the table, not just with, and there's some great programs that we want to make sure are continually funded, but also thinking about, you know, what have we not done in this community that can really start to solve these problems. And so it's, you know, it's wonderful to have you all here and have you talk a little bit about what your experience was. As we end the show, is there briefly anything, any of the issues that were brought up that you were surprised by?
Is there anything you were surprised by?
I would have to say, you know, other than the people really knowing what is going on in the community, it was helpful to have the experts, the agencies, the donors all represented, because even within the process, I made sure that when we broke out into the small groups, that each person was still represented. So, I mean, that in itself was, it was a great way to get to the end goal.
And just listening to their unified voices about where they wanted to be and where they wanted to see the community.
And did you think that kind of helping them think about that vision first was helpful in doing that? Because most people aren't thinking about where we necessarily want to be.
They
They're
just
looking
want
at
to fix a problem, I think.
Immediate problem.
So to have a vision and think of how can we as a community reach this vision, I think that was definitely something that doing that first really helped them, because everything else just kind of lined up after that.
Well, I want to thank you all so much. I know you have committed an enormous amount of time over the past 5 or 6 months and really been vested in this process, and we appreciate your leadership and what you do for the community through your day jobs and then also through your volunteer work with the United Way. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for your United Way. We look forward to showing you this progress as the years progress.